Hello, my beautiful friends. So, before I head out to celebrate the 4th of July down on Deal Island, I wanted to take a moment because today is a day of remembrance. And I've been following the news, as you know, for the trial of Brian Kohberger and his plea deal. The case is especially close to my heart for a number of reasons. As you know, the Kohbergers live not too far from me here in eastern Pennsylvania. But more importantly than that, Kohberger was a student at the university where I teach. And so, I've been following it since day one. One of his professors is, sort of one of the lead people that talks about killers like him, and she's a friend of mine. So, I've been very interested in this case for a number of reasons and have followed it. But in addition to that, there is the Diddy case, which I did not follow, and of course the firefighters in Idaho. And so later this morning, I've tried to organize a worldwide everybody go play Amazing Grace and record it and send it to the families. I don't know that that will work out, but I will be there in our local park. With one of my buddies, Mark, and we're going to play Amazing Grace at noon to honor the two fallen firefighters and to send hope to the one that is in recovery. So I don't want to say this person's name ever again. I don't want it to come out of my mouth because I want us to remember the four victims whose names should be on our hearts. And that is Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Madison Mogen. They are four young people who had their lives ahead of them, beautiful people, a great group of friends that lived in an off-campus house, and they were slaughtered in their sleep by a predator. And he got to choose his fate, and that is so unsettling. And watching it, the families didn't agree about what should happen, and I get that. I absolutely get both sides of the story. On one hand, for those that were accepting of the deal, it brings an end to all of the nonsense, right? He admitted that he did it, and if you watch the proceedings, he showed no emotion. He doesn't regret having done this. There wasn't an ounce of sadness in his face. The two girls, Kaylee and Xana, I think were the targets. And unfortunately, Madison was coming up the stairs, and she was a byproduct. But it doesn't matter if he was there to kill one or to kill four. He was there to kill, and it was premeditated, and he's not remorseful at all. And in the wake of that tragedy are the families that have to live and relive this tragedy in their heads. And I include his family because, as a mother, I can't imagine, like the Kohbergers have to say, that was our son who did that. What did we do as parents that raised a boy that could do that, right? And they're obviously not responsible. He was a grown-ass man. They're not responsible, but everybody is going to point at them forever. His sister, they're going to blame them, and it's not their fault. But he is responsible alone for this, and he's taken responsibility because he's admitted guilt, but he isn't taken any emotional responsibility, and so these families have to live with it. And so I understand not wanting to continue on, right? Like, just tell him, we just want him to say he did it, and then he can rot in prison for the rest of his life. And it doesn't matter that he's going to get 3 hats and a cot on our tax time, because truthfully, because of our appeal process, he was going to get that anyway as we try to appeal all the way through. And God only knows when he would ever get to the death penalty, right? Like that would actually happen, because at any time that can switch, right? So right now, Idaho is a death penalty state, but the next person who comes in can say that it's not, and then his sentence gets commuted. And then it doesn't matter if the next person that comes in says it's a death penalty state. You can't reassign death penalties to somebody once the sentence has been commuted. So, in a way, like, it doesn't matter because he was going to serve life in prison anyway on our tax time, right? But also just because of how ridiculous our appeal process can be. So I understand those families, and they say, just, tell us that you did it, and then rot in prison, and then we don't ever have to go into a court again. We don't have to be in front of reporters all the time. We can go on with our lives. So I do appreciate that. And having gone through a jury trial, obviously very different, but my son had a stroke in utero that could have been prevented. A lot happens when the jury is not in the room. All the important things that need to be said in front of the jury aren't. They're said when they're not in the room. It's all theater. There is no justice in the system. I will tell you that firsthand, having sat through a 6-week trial for my infant son. We were very, very lucky that one of the jurors saw through the nonsense. But it was the way that it worked in Pennsylvania is that it had to be a majority vote. And I don't blame the jury, because the things that they needed to hear were all said when the jury wasn't in the room, and they said that was prejudicial. And the first day of the trial, they threw out the standard operating procedure manual of the hospital and said it was prejudicial. And that is what you need to prove in a malpractice suit. You have to prove that they didn't uphold their standard of care. Well, how can you prove that when you can't use the manual? Right? So that, I mean, obviously a very different case, but I learned then that justice is false. It's unreal. It doesn't exist. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all, excuse my language, bullshit. It's really bullshit. And I don't blame those families for not wanting to go through it, because I wouldn't wish that process on anyone. I know what we went through. I'm very thankful my son was an infant and doesn't remember it, but we sat through it, and I feel that frustration of those families, right? I would have liked somebody to take accountability for what happened, and in a way they did, because they changed the processes at the hospital. The intern that said I was having Braxton Hicks, and as a high-risk pregnancy, he got fired and moved to another hospital, but he's still practicing medicine somewhere. So some other poor woman has had to deal with him, and his laziness and his inability to be a proper medical doctor, right? So I mean, things happened, and things that I can't see, but there was no justice for my son. Right, there was no justice for causing what happened, right? And so I understand not wanting to go through that. I understand not wanting to go through, but likewise, I understand the families that are unhappy with this decision, that he gets to decide his own fate. He gets to say that, well, I'm not going to do the death penalty. I'm going to just spend my life in prison, writing books and reading, and getting to do what I want to do, study the people that I love, these crazy, these killers. I get to be just like them. I get to be studied like them. I win because I get to do all these things that I wanted to do. And listen, my heart just goes out to that dad. Oh, the one dad, if I could have reached through the screen just to hug the guy, because you could just see the pain in his face. And every time he speaks, and you could see, he's fighting for his little girl. And it's all he can do. And he feels robbed by the justice system. And I understand that, because I felt robbed. Obviously a very different case with my son. But you feel robbed, and you feel like I've been a law-abiding citizen, and I've paid my taxes, and I've done all the right things, and the justice system wasn't there for me when I needed it. It wasn't there for my little girl when she needed the justice system. So I do feel his frustration and his pain. I feel it. Obviously, I don't know these people. But if I could say anything to him, I would say, listen, I feel your pain. I feel what you're going through. And I understand that it doesn't seem fair that this monster gets to eat 3 huts, have a cot, get to read books all day and write his memoirs, and get to be studied, by people who, study mass murderers and serial killers. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem just. And it isn't fair, and it isn't just. But the way our system works, you wouldn't want it the other way. Let's say he got, he found guilty on all the evidence they did have. It's hard to predict a jury. It's hard to know. We had a rock solid case. But again, what happens when the jury's not in the room? That's when all the important stuff comes out that they don't hear, right? So they can only make a decision based on what they can hear, right? So God only knows what the verdicts would have been, right? There might not have been enough evidence that they got to hear to convict, on a death penalty case. So you never know how the jury would have responded. And let's say that they did find him guilty on all 4 counts and he got the death penalty. Then we have years and years of appeals. And you might not even be here when they finally walk him to the room, right? And so you have to relive that every single time, every single appeal. You have to go back. Your family has to go through it all over again and go through all through the news and all through the stuff. You don't want that either. You don't want that. I know it's heartbreaking, but you don't want that either. This way, at least, we were going to pay for him to live and read and do his own thing anyway, because that's what would have happened in the appeal process. It was going to end up the same way for him either way with time. This way, at least, he did it. At least, that there is no question that he is the one who did it. We'll never know why. Even if he had gone to trial, he wouldn't have had to say why he did it. But we can guess why, right? I'm not a psychologist, I'm an English professor, but, he obviously had feelings for one of the girls and was probably jealous of the lifestyle that these kids led. These were bright, beautiful kids. And every semester, I have bright, beautiful kids just like these 4 in my class. They're funny. They're bright. I have such hope for this generation because they're kind and they're creative and they're smart, right? These 4 represent, I have students that look just like them and act just like them and are fun. And they have their party nights and they do their college thing just like I did. 100 years ago, right? These are beautiful, beautiful humans, and they're living their best lives, right? And he never had that because of his personality, and so he became obsessed with jealousy, and he focused on the one girl, a girl he could never have, and then he planned his attack. Right. So, will he ever tell us, why he did it? No, but we can guess why, right? We can guess why. He wanted to be like his heroes who are, serial killers and mass murderers. He wanted to have the notoriety that those people have. He wants to study, those kinds of people. Now he gets to live among them. So all of those things, like we can guess why he did it. And does it matter why he did it? No, it won't change why he did it. It won't change that he did it. So he gets to live in a prison, but now he'll live in Gen Pop. And I worked in a prison. It was my first teaching job, and I do believe that criminals that do things like sell drugs and prostitution and I was in a county prison, right? I believe education is a way to lift them out of that lifestyle, to get them into better opportunities. I'm not God and I can't judge a soul. But a predator like that, can't be on the streets, right? Even if they say, I'm rehabilitated, a predator like that cannot go back on the streets. But he showed no remorse. He is not feeling guilty. He's pretty proud of himself. He got to control the situation today, and he's going to get to write books, and he's going to get interviewed, and he's going to get studied, and these are all the things that he wanted to do. And I feel for these families because I feel like they didn't get a say in that. And I would have liked to have seen something in, I'd like to see something in the sentencing that says that anything he does, any single cent made has to go to the victims' families, anything. And I don't know if you can even do that. I don't know the rules around that. But if I could say anything to the families, it's like, this is over now and you can move on. And so I refuse to say his name again, because I don't want to remember him. And I was thinking about this on my way home from work yesterday. I was thinking, with all of the people that this person idolized, we know their names, but I couldn't tell you any names of the victims that those people harmed or hurt, right? I don't know who the victims are of the different things. I mean, perhaps the only one might be the victims of Charles Manson, because they were, they were famous people. But when you look at all of the other ones that this person idolized, I don't know the names of their victims. So I'm going to commit to remembering the names of these victims, because they are more important, and they were beautiful souls taken too soon by a monster. So please join me in remembering the names of Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Madison Mogen, 4 beautiful people whose lives were cut short by a monster. Don't remember the monster. Remember the beautiful lives, the 20 and 21-year-olds that had a beautiful impact on all the people around them, that had their whole lives in front of them, who were kind and generous and were willing and ready to change the world with their brightness. Remember them. Don't remember him. He doesn't deserve it. I am wishing you, and I am wishing the families of Ethan, Kaylee, Xana, and Madison, I am wishing you all the most best and brightest in life and love. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye.